Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's session. So I'll just give it one more minute before we kick off and to go into some of the more technical aspects of today's call. So my name is Nicole Bustamante, and I'm from the Global Funds Communication Department. I'll be coordinating today's call. On the next slide, you'll see the updates to the performance framework and detailed budget annexes. So as mentioned before, I'll get into the session. I'd like to remind all participants of the interpretation function on Zoom. As you'll see on this slide and on your Zoom screens, you'll have a globe icon at the bottom because we have simultaneous interpretation made available to you all, and participants can select their preferred language of English, French, or Spanish. We also invite all attendees to enter any questions they have in the chat, and we will answer them and collect them throughout the session and answer them during the Q&As. And additionally, the presentation and recording of this webinar will also be available on iLearn, along with the other webinar resources from previous sessions. So now, for today's session, if we can go to the next slide, please. There are three sections: advanced grant making, the overview of the performance framework, and the overview of the budget, detailed budget. The time allotted for each session is listed here, and the questions and answers will follow the performance framework and detailed budget presentations. I'll now hand over to our first presenter, Colin Brewer from the Operational Efficiency team, who'll go into our first section of advanced grant making. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending the presentation. As Nicole said, I work with the Operational Efficiency team, which supports the country teams in many of the grant lifecycle processes that country teams, PRs, and LFAs, CCMs go through. So today I'm going to be speaking about advanced grant making, which is an important topic for the upcoming funding request process. Next slide, please. As many of you know, the purpose of doing a funding request and signing a grant is to be ready to implement at the beginning of the implementation period. What we've seen historically is that the time taken to submit the funding request and sign the grant at times leaves very little time to actually prepare for implementation to start on the first day. So to provide applicants and PRs with more time to ensure implementation readiness, we are encouraging applicants, where possible, to advance grant making by moving some of the funding request work forward into some of the grant making work forward into the funding request process. So what does this mean? It means that applicants who have a program continuation approach, or where the PR is continuing, which is the case in many of our portfolios, we're recommending that the PRs get involved in grant making, in the funding request process, to provide a grant making level of detail in some of the key funding request documents. I'll show what that looks like in just a minute. That then allows PRs to have more time in the period during grant making to focus on the activities that prepare them to be ready on the first day of implementation. And what we've seen in our own internal analysis is that grants which are signed early have generally a better execution of activities in year one of implementation. So again, we're really recommending that applicants take advantage of this approach wherever possible to gain time and better prepare implementation to start on day one. Next slide, please. So what does advanced grant making look like during the funding request stage? You can see here on the screen the three key documents which accompany the funding request, which are the performance framework, the detailed budget, and the health product management template. For the performance framework, advanced grant making means that we would include PR-specific coverage indicators and targets We would also provide the disaggregation of those targets where it applies and set those targets with a 6-month reporting frequency, which is the standard for high impact and core portfolios at grant signing. For the detailed budget, this would mean providing PR specific budget lines, which have already been budgeted at the cost input level. Again, that cost input requirement applying for high impact and core portfolios. Detailed assumptions to support accurate unit costs are recommended to be included. Again, this is where having the knowledge and experience of the PR is very helpful, given their work on this in the past cycle. And where possible, ring fencing subrecipient budgets. What do we mean by that? Well, even if the subrecipients themselves haven't been identified, as much as possible, grouping the budget by the expected implementation per subrecipient will help to advance the grant making discussions. On the health product management template, similar to the budget, we're recommending to include detailed assumptions to support accurate quantifications and unit costs. Again, PR expertise may be very helpful in this regard. What we've seen from the portfolios that took this approach in the past cycle is that they can gain up to 30 additional days before the implementation starts to be ready. So just to summarize once again, where possible, and in particular where you have been selected for a program continuation approach or where your PR is continuing, we strongly encourage that the PRs be involved in the development of the funding request documents to provide this grant making level of detail at the funding request stage. This will help save time during grant making, which will allow grants to be ready to implement on the first day of the implementation period. Thank you very much. I'll pass it now back to my colleague, Nicole.
Thanks, Colin. So if you can go to the next slide, we're going to go into the performance framework overview, and we have Beatrice Tomei from MECA here presenting for us today. Over to you, Beatrice.
Thanks, Nicole, and welcome everyone. My name is Beatrice Tomei. I'm a monitoring evaluation specialist at the MECA team. That stands for Monitoring Evaluation Country Analysis Team at the Global Fund, and I'm joined by my colleague Sophia for the session. And I'm sure many of you are already very familiar with the performance framework, but for the benefit of new PRs or new colleagues working in existing PRs, we thought we would provide a general overview first, and then go more into detail on what has changed for the new funding cycle. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So what is the performance framework? It's really meant to be a statement of the expected performance over the funding request period, and it should reflect the ambition of the PR towards achieving program results and impact. So this is also why it's very important that the grant performance framework is very much aligned with the national plans. And we'll talk about it in a little bit as well. So in summary, the performance framework, which is only an Excel file, it should link the program goals and objectives to what are the modules which are reflecting the program areas of the specific activities to be implemented. And these are organized by specific interventions and their related indicators. They are described in the modular framework. That again is the guidance document that lists, again, modules, interventions, and indicators that will support the development of both the performance framework as well as the detailed budget that we're going to see in a little bit as part of the session as well. It focuses on impact, outcome, and coverage indicators, so we don't have anything at the input level as part of the performance framework. It should include then targets against which the results are to be reported by the country, by the different PRs in the country, if that's the case. And again, should be matching the national strategic plans for the 3 diseases. Additionally to the indicators, it also includes what we call the work plan tracking measures. And these are meant to be helpful in monitoring additional grant activities. And they were mostly useful in the past cycles to help measure implementation of RSSH and CRG activities. But over time, we've seen them being used for other more disease-specific activities as well. In particular, when there are no sufficient coverage indicators for us to monitor progress of the grant implementation. And the work plan tracking measures will have its own sheet in the Excel framework, performance framework file. So the performance framework will have various stages during the grant cycle, but mostly there's a funding request stage. So it will be submitted alongside the funding request application material, and it will be further refined during grant making. And it can be eventually revised if there are grant revisions along the way. It will be used for grant performance assessment and KPI monitoring. Grant performance assessment will, of course, be key to the PRs, and also for KPI, so key performance indicator monitoring, alongside other data sources, of course, coming from other partners such as WHO, UNAIDS, etc. But just so everyone is aware that a lot of the KPI monitoring will also come from programmatic results, which is key. So results against the targets in the performance framework are, again, one of the inputs to determine disbursements to the PR during grant implementation. Hence, this being a key document as part of the relationship with the different PRs. Next slide, please. So what's included in the performance framework? So again, it will include the program goals and the objectives in order for this grant to achieve the national goals over the grant term. There will be a list of modules for which funding is being requested. So again, the performance framework is going to be very much linked to the funding that's being requested to the detailed budget. Hence the guidance for both documents being the same, the modular framework again. It will include the indicators, so impact, outcome, and coverage indicators with its own baselines and targets. And alongside their report due dates for impact and outcome indicators. It will include the geographic coverage of these indicators as well as work plan tracking measures, mostly for the coverage output level reporting. And these can be national or subnational. These are to be specified in the comment box of the Excel file, the performance framework file. It will include disaggregation, and there have been a few changes in disaggregation for the new funding cycle, some of which were dropped, some were added to respond to the new global fund strategy. So in general, these disaggregations will be then reported every year. And there are also baselines for the disaggregation categories in the disaggregation tab of the performance framework. There's a target accumulation column in which you can select how the targets will be aggregated for annual funding decisions. So in particular for high impact and core portfolios that generally report every 6 months, these accumulation options, and you have cumulative and other types of accumulation for how these semesterly targets are going to be annualized in terms of results for the grant. You can choose whether an indicator is a subset of another indicator as part of what's included in the performance framework. And again, you have a specific sheet for the work plan tracking measures in where you add qualitative milestones as well as the different criteria in order to deem these milestones achieved or not. So you have your own dedicated work plan tracking measures tab in the performance framework, and which will also be used for grant performance assessment. Next slide, please. So the two main stages of development of the performance framework, again, are at funding request stage. It will be submitted alongside the other application materials. And the performance framework at funding request stage will be a single file, and it will have the various PR specific information in it. I think this is the main difference from then the grant making stage of development of the performance framework, in where you have separate files for each PR. And of course, the grant making stage PF will be fine tuned based on the back and forth with the teams at the Global Fund, etc., and will be based on the detailed budget as well, so that these two are very much aligned. Next slide, please. So now on to what's new for the new funding cycle in terms of the performance framework form. So we're happy to say that, or we're hopeful that a few enhancements have been made based on the feedback that we received in the last years. But already reassuring you that no structural changes have been made on the form, but a few changes were chosen, hopefully again for user friendliness. So for example, the data rows are now colored differently for better reading of the files. These files can be big and not so easy to read, so that the colors are now better, more friendly. A feature has been added in order to alert users to errors, and we'll have a slide to show you how this will work. But these alerts were added to the impact, outcome, and coverage indicators tab. A change as well in the reverse indicator column. So for the standard indicators, they are already pre-filled now in the new form as reverse or non-reverse. For custom indicators, you have to manually add whether it's a reverse or non-reverse, but for standard, they'll be already pre-filled. The print view sheet has been replaced by 5 different print views. This is the feedback that we got. There was different, again, to have a good file that could be printed. So then the print view, again, is now divided in 5 with the summary, the goals and impact, objectives and outcome, coverage, and work plan tracking measures. Another main change was that the population column has been removed from the overview tab with regards to the work plan tracking measures section, to the coverage indicator tab and the work plan tracking measure sheet itself. And this is because specific populations have been added to the specific interventions. So the drop-down menus will now contain this information rather than having to go to the population column. So we hope that this was also something helpful. And there's a new tab to document target assumptions, also something that was added after feedback received. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So a few things to remember, and the main things being that if the template is modified, is broken by anyone using and adding information to the Excel file, it will render the file unimportable, if that's the word. So this will mean having to download yet another form and fill in all the information again. So a few things, do's and don't about the file, mostly don'ts. So 1, please do not break the password protection. Something key that we oftentimes see, because Excel is a file that's easy to be broken into, so you can easily copy and paste information onto cells that already include information such as drop-down lists, formula, etc. So please avoid doing that. Do not type or copy and paste information on cells that already have, for example, features such as drop-down lists. If you have oftentimes numerator, denominator, and then a percent, if you do not have the numerator and denominator, it's okay to add the percent manually. In which case, please remember that when time evolves and you have a new performance framework during grant making or during a performance framework review revision, you can actually, if you can add the numerator and denominator, just remember that you have to let now the formula calculates the percent. Please be reminded of that. Please do not add or remove columns, rows, or new worksheets in the PF. And please stick to the original file format, which is the regular Excel format. Do not save it with a different file format. What you can do for user friendliness of the file, you can increase, decrease the whole sizes, column sizes. You can freeze and unfreeze, hide and unhide. But please make sure that everything is unfrozen or unhidden before you submit the template. And please, the final note, please ensure that all the required fields are correctly filled in the template. Next slide, please. And this is a plea for everyone involved in developing, reviewing the performance framework. There's a instructions tab. It's the very first tab in the file that has been revised to align with the changes in the PF, and it's been carefully done for all the users so that it hopefully will support you while filling it up throughout the grant cycle, throughout the different stages of the performance framework. Please go to the instructions tab. Next slide, please. So a few other key considerations. Again, make sure that all the required fields are correctly filled. Please know, and as a constant reminder, everything that's filled in the overview tab, or a lot of it, will be taken to the other tab. So please make sure that the overview tab is correctly filled. Otherwise, the subsequent tabs will not function optimally. And this can also cause issues with importing the file. Again, do not include text or symbols when it's a number field or an A in the baseline and target number fields. There's a specific column in which you can add that baseline is not available, but please not add text to the number fields. We're going to look in the next slide in terms of the decimals. There's been a few decimal changes in the file itself. But please know that baseline and target fields in GOS for both impact and outcome indicators will allow for 4 decimal places. We think that's more than enough room. So please try to stick to this range. There's a comment field box that allows for a lot of text and a lot of text. The word limit is pretty vast. Please try not to exceed it. We shouldn't really need to exceed the word limit there. And for PRs that are not in where English is not the first language, let's make sure that the translations are completed and the country team is ready to help you finalize and ensure that the translations are part of the file so that it's uploaded completely. Next slide, please. So a few error alerts that we'll have in this new performance framework file. So here are a few, we list a few of the triggers for the error messages to pop up. And in the following slide, we'll look at how the pop-ups will appear in the file. So for example, if it's a rate indicator in where we should only add the numerator. If the user has entered a denominator or a percent for that type of indicator, this will trigger an error message. In terms of the drop-down menu, so the cells that already have a drop-down menu as a feature. So say that the user has selected a standard indicator from the drop-down, and then tries to check in the yes or no in the reverse custom indicator. This will raise a red flag because you cannot have a standard and a custom indicator in the same line. So this will pop up an error message. Whenever there's an attempt to overwrite or copy paste, again, a drop-down cell, or if, for example, a standard indicator is added from the drop-down following a module that had been selected previously, and then the user comes and changes the module, this will also trigger an error message. Again, copy pasting text in numerator, denominator for baseline or targets, or if there's an attempt to copy paste a non-existing indicator or a non-existing module. So all of this will will trigger alerts. So in the next slide, I think we do have, so we'll look at the error messages in the following one. But for this one, so just a few notes on the decimals and rounding. Again, in Excel, the default decimals for impact, outcome, and coverage indicators is what's described on the left. So again, for impact and outcome, baseline and target numerators go on to 4 decimal places, and the percents will go on to 2 decimal places. For coverage indicators, baseline numerators, denominators, and targets will not have for baseline, sorry, there won't be decimals. In general, coverage indicators will be speaking of people or services provided, visits, tests, etc. But in terms of the percent, both target and baseline will allow for 2 decimal places. So this is the default, but Excel can be, you can go longer than this. Just know that if you add more decimals, the changes won't be imported into Gauss and into the print view. The default that you see in both Gauss and the PDF file of the print view will be what's on the left, so you understand why. And something's been changed in terms of the rounding. So the rounding will now be upwards to the nearest 10. So for example, 32.5 will be rounded to 33, and the decimals will still be displayed in the PDF, but this is valid for the numbers and how they'll look. You see them in Gauss, just so you know. Just keep the slide for reference, so you know what's the default in all systems, Gauss and the Excel file. Next slide, please. So this is just a screenshot of what the error messages look like. So for example, in this performance framework line, we're adding a coverage indicator. And I think if you can click, I think there's a few animations. Yes, so I think here we try to add text in what should be a number cell, and this triggers then an error message in the same line, and you have to go back and see where in the line there's been an error. And this also triggers, if you look at the top to the right, it will flag the number of errors in the sheet. So if you make more errors, such as this one in the file, this number of errors cell will then count the total of errors. And I think that was it for this slide. If you can please click, yeah, so just to show where the error messages will appear. And I think that was all from me at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. We do have a series of questions that have come through the chat, but I'd also like to flag, since we have interpretation going on, we'll be reading the questions aloud so they get interpreted into the various channels we have. So Beatrice, if you may, could you read the French questions? And I can help you with the English ones, and we'll have the interpreters manage the rest. And just to answer this first question on the slide, these slide decks have been shared with people who have previously registered for the call, but they'll also be available on iLearn. So via the link we've shared a few times in the chat, you can click that and access the Spanish, French, and English versions of these slides. So over to you, Beatrice.
Should I read as is in French so that it gets translated, is it?
Yes, please.
Yeah, bonjour à tous.
So hello everybody, could you share with us the guide for subject and evaluation that defines indicators and the calculation, the periodicity, the cumulative character, and if this is updated or not?
I get confused with when there's interpretation going on. So yes, so the new modular framework is already available at the website. At the Global Fund website. And in the modular framework, you will not have all the details that you raise here. So how to calculate, etc. This will come in the indicator guidance sheets that are being revised. They will also be translated into French and Spanish for this new cycle. So this is something that's been added as well after a lot of feedback and requests. So again, these will still be made available to everyone, but the modular framework with the final list of indicators is already available.
Great, thank you. And we have the third question from Faustine. When should we receive these templates?
In terms of the guidance, or is it the PFs themselves? Then I wouldn't know. Then I wouldn't know what's the process in terms of sharing those all the application materials with the PRs.
So
David, yeah, maybe.
yeah, I'm
Maybe
just
you can
gonna
come in.
hop
Yeah.
on
Yes,
really
thanks.
quickly. My name is David Nash-Mendez. I also work in the Access to Funding department at the Global Fund. The performance framework and budget templates are custom generated for each country and will be available through the country team, which will generate that customized template.
Thank you. Okay, so I think next question is on actually the budget. Although again, so pourrions-nous obtenir les guides pour le cadre du budget comme par le passé?
So can we get the guidance for the budget framework as we did in the past?
On the budget itself, a lot of a lot of the guidance is again aligned with the modular framework. It's the overall guidance, but I'll let my colleagues speak more in particular with regards to the budget in a little bit, if that's okay. La désagrégation est due une seule fois dans l'année, même si le rapportage est semestriel.
This disaggregation, is it due once a year, even if the report is semestrial?
For everyone, so each indicator will have a predefined accumulation type or a few different accumulation types to be chosen. And this will depend, the choice of the accumulation type will really depend on how the program is set up. So this is why for some of the, or for many of the indicators, there's only one accumulation type, but for many others there is. And the reason why is because, again, we know that countries, it will vary how they'll set up the different programs. And this is why there are different accumulation types. And the importance, again, of the accumulation type is how the PR wants to see the results aggregated annually. So if for the countries that report only once annually, it won't really matter because we'll only take the end of the reporting period, end of the year results. But for the countries that report every 6 months, then the moment you have a PF agreed upon during funding request stage and then on to grant making, the disaggregation type will remain the same throughout the grant cycle. And again, the thinking behind the accumulation type will be how do we aggregate these results? Do we use, for example, the same denominator because it's people receiving services and the group of people remains the same if it's PrEP, for example? So it will really depend on how the program is set up, but it will only matter for the portfolios which are reporting semi-annually, so every 6 months. I hope that helps.
Great, so the next question, in completing the overview tab for completeness, do we include all the modules included in the funding or those with indicators and WPTMs only?
That's a very, very good question. Most definitely, the modules you will include in the performance framework will match the ones that for which there's funding being requested. They absolutely match. And then, because the idea is that you include measurements, both through indicators and work plan tracking measures, for the modules for which there's been funding requested. So they're absolutely aligned.
And is there a performance framework for C19RM for the next cycle?
Yeah, on that one, I think we'll have to hold on a little bit on that question. There has not been one so far, but there is a discussion on, yes, having a performance framework for C19RM for the next cycle, but this has not been finalized. We'll have to stay tuned for more news on that one. And then a question from Gabriela, if it's possible to have the presentation in French. I understand, yes. I think these slides were translated. Is that correct, colleagues? I think these, yes, both in French as well as in Spanish, for sure. I think there's been a request to have more materials. For example, the indicator guidance sheets translated into other languages, and I think there's been particular efforts being made in order for those to be available in other languages. But thanks for the question.
Yes, and just to flag that all of the resources from this information session, so the slides that you're seeing and the recording in 3 languages, English, French, and Spanish, will be available on iLearn. The link has been shared in the chat a few times, so we can send again. Thank you. I think there's another question.
Yes, thanks. So will there be,
yeah.
oh, sorry.
Please go.
Yeah, will there be will there be new indicator guidance sheets? Yes, they are being finalized as we speak, because yes, there's been changes in the modular framework. In particular, with regards to RSSH indicators, some have been added, and of course these have to be revised based on global guidance. So of course, in the last years, there's been revised guidelines for the 3 diseases. So the new modular framework is aligned with the new global guidance, as well as the indicator guidance sheets. And we hope that the new indicator guidance sheets will also have a little more guidance on how to interpret the indicators as well, the results coming out of these indicators. So again, also please stay tuned for those to come out very soon.
Thank you. We have one more question that's come in, which I can read before we get it onto the slide. From Esther. Why including modules that don't have indicators or WPTMs in the PF? Is it a bit confusing sometimes, especially with the CCM? They will expect you to report on all the modules indicated in the PF. Any guidance on this?
Like again, in ideally, the modules to be included in the PF are going to be the ones for which funding is being requested. Now, this is, I would say, the basis of the selection of both modules indicators to be included in the performance frameworks. Additionally to that, and I think this is where this discussion with the CCMs get heated, is that there are other requirements as well. There, for example, the requirements on report on the KPIs. And it's happened before that sometimes a country does not have very relevant funding in that particular area. Nevertheless, the country contributes to the KPI for that specific area, so that a module, an indicator, is then added. So again, so just to say that there's more complexity to the choice of modules, the choice of indicators in the PF than what's being requested in terms of funding, but the base of it should start with the funding. And then again, I think the conversations with the CCM and of course with country team support is to try to address to the other reporting requirements. So I think the confusing piece is for countries is probably where there's not enough investment that would justify an inclusion of a specific module or indicator. But just to say that, again, this is very much country tailored, but oftentimes there are other requirements that need to be addressed additionally to what's added in terms of funding. But having said that, for the new the new funding cycle, the various teams at the Global Fund are working on more specific guidance to both internally as well as, of course, to the PRs in terms of PF developments. So also stay tuned for that. These are very, very recent discussions that have been ongoing.
Thank you, Beatrice. I think there are no more questions in the chat regarding the PF. So we can move on to the next section, which is detailed budget. But if there are any other remaining questions regarding the performance framework, we invite attendees to please share them in the chat and we can collect them towards the end of this next section. Thank you. And now I will pass over to Sattar from Finance to go over the detailed budget overview. Over to you, Sattar.
Thank you, Nico and colleagues. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Sattar. I'm Senior Finance Specialist, and today I'm going to present a detailed budget template. Next slide, please. So fundamentally, we haven't made any major changes in detailed budget template in terms of structure and content. There are only 5 areas or categorization of changes, which we are going to discuss today. We have already provided instruction document clarifying all those areas, each and every tab, like we provided in last cycle as well. So today, the focus of our discussion would be on those changes. For any detail, you can refer to the Global Fund website, where the instruction documents available, which can provide you all those details and will answer your question related to each and every tab of the detailed budget template. When we are talking about the changes as compared to the last version, the first major change we have made in this template is budget frequency. As you know, previously, the budget was on quarterly basis. Now, going forward, in the template, you will see like we will be requiring budget on a yearly basis. So the budget will be on yearly basis rather than on quarterly basis. It will impact on detailed budget tab and setup tab as well. We used to set up our quarterly budget. Now it's going to be a yearly budget. The second major change that we have made in detailed budget template is we have split detailed budget tab into 2 different tabs. One is for non-HP or non-HP. It's non-health product related a budget, and one tab is for HP health product related budget, which include a cost input 4, 5, 6, and 7, and non-HP, which exclude this one. But there are other conditions for this one. This is only applicable where implement they require HPMT. If the implementer they don't require HPMT, then they will be budgeting only in non-HP tab. For this, you can find all those detail in the instruction document for both detailed budget template and HPMT tool. The third major change we have made in the detailed budget template is standardization of budget assumptions. You might have seen previously in detailed budget template, those tabs were empty. These were blank Excel files where implementer, the user, they used to provide all those budget assumptions. But now we have provided some standardization on those information, particularly for human resources and TRC. You will see some templates, some table where you will be required to provide required information just to support your budget in detailed budget template in the form of assumptions. Just for your information, these tables are, although these are very standardized table, you can use for budget assumptions, but these are editable. These are some unprotected sheet where you can discuss a respective finance specialist and you can agree if you want to modify, if you want to tailor it to your individual requirements, you can just make all those changes. The fourth important change we have made as compared to the last budget template is we have updated a standardization of reference data. This is aligned with the discussion on modular framework, performance framework. We have updated module intervention and cost inputs just to align with the updated module framework and costing dimensions. In addition to this, you will see, other update in other reference data, particularly related to the type of implementing entity. This is based on the latest rollout of grant entity data, OPN and related tools, where we are providing some standardized information. We have updated reference data just to align with the grant entity data. Type of third-party supplier, this is another area we provided some standardization of the payment just to align with the global fund requirements in terms of direct payment to the third-party suppliers as per budgeting guidelines requirements. There are two other dimensions where you will see some differences, some changes as compared to the last version. One is geography. Previously, you might you have seen there was one dimension by the name of geography and location, but it wasn't mandatory. It was just an optional. But this time we have made this mandatory just to meet the requirement of the global fund new strategy to track investment at various levels, particularly at community level. Then we have sources of funds. This is where previously you used to have various type of sources, like for UQD, for potential saving. We have removed all those sources of fund. Now you will see only approved funding, which is approved and which is allocated through allocation letters. And in addition to this, you will see another two options, which is special purpose 1 and special purpose 2. These are just placeholder for now. And we will be providing further information when those placeholder will be used. On geography, I would like to mention this here, although it's a mandatory field, but there are some flexibility for this one. The user, they are required to provide that information at very generic level, like central level, subnational level, sub-subnational level, and community level, etc. You will see all those dropped some here. In addition to all those changes, which I have just mentioned, we have removed few tabs, which is population tab. You might have heard from colleagues on population tab related data and performance framework. Now it's no more required because these are embedded in intervention and module. So population tab is no more part of detailed budget template. Then we have removed additional summary tab. Previously, you used to see some tabs, summary of source of funds, various source of funds, you can say. Now we have removed this one, and you will see only one tab with source of fund, and there will be a drop down. You can select, whatever the source of fund is required, whether it's approved funding, special purpose 1 or 2, whatever your requirement is. Next slide, please. Thank you. These were the key changes. Just I want to explain, various tabs here. And for detail, as I mentioned, detailed instruction document are already published on the Global Fund website. You can see the same link which were used previously, and we can share the link through this this chat as well. But all detailed instruction are available there. You will see, for each tab, for each content of the detailed budget tab. Just for summarization and just to have a quick overview of all those tabs, we have categorized whole detailed budget tabs into 5 categories. The first one is setup tab. You will see there are 3 sections of this setup tab, or setup sheet, you can say. The first one is reporting setup. This is where you will set up. Sorry, the first one is the grant information. This is a pre-populated information from GOS. As mentioned by my colleague David earlier, the detailed budget template is generated for a specific grant and disease component, and this is shared by the country team. And this is where this information is pre-populated grant information. It includes the name of the disease component and related information. The second tab is reporting setup. This is where you can provide all those details related to the start of the implementation period and related financial reporting requirements, including audit report and financial reporting cycle. For grant information section, you will see some additional drop down or some additional requirements. Most importantly, it's related to the selection of HPMT. As I mentioned, we have divided detailed budget tab into 2 different tabs. One is HP and non-HP. So you need to answer these questions based on the instruction you have received from the country team, whether and based on the budgeting guideline and based on the instruction in HPMT guidelines, user guidelines for HPMT. You need to understand whether you require HPMT or not. It's based on the portfolio categorization, focus portfolio, high impact. There are different requirements. You can see all those details there. When you need to select, answer whether it's applicable or yes or no. If you don't select, then you will not see any drop down, any information in detailed budget tab. So this is a mandatory question. You need to answer this question. Otherwise, you will not see any related information in detailed budget tab. And the selection will be based on the requirement of the portfolio, whether HPMT is applicable or not. Then the third section of this tab is budget template setup. This is where the user will be required to provide information relating to the PR, SRs, ICRs, third-party suppliers, and geography. What we discussed previously. These are the various dimensions in the detailed budget tab. The second categorization of those tabs are detailed budget tab. And detailed budget tab, as I mentioned, we have divided into two different type of tab. One is HP tab, one is not HP, one is non-HP tab. I already discussed it based on the portfolio categorization and the requirement. If HPMT is applicable, then we will be providing budget in non-HP only for cost input 1, 2, 3. And 8, 9, 10, and 13. We are not required to provide any budget for cost input 4, 5, and 6. This is because this is what the information will be coming from HPMT. The way this will work, like in HPMT, we have set up same tab, detailed budget tab. When the user will be entering the data in HPMT, it will be consolidated in the one tab. When HPMT finalized, the user, they will be required to copy paste from HPMT to detailed budget tab. So in the detailed budget template, the detailed budget HP tab, you cannot provide any manual input. It will be available only for copy and paste. And for copy and paste functionality and all those requirements, we have provided detailed instructions in the instruction document for both HPMT and detailed budget template. The third categorization is assumption tabs. Previously, as I mentioned, we had various type of tabs, like for HR assumption, TRC assumptions, and some other, the free sheets, you can say. Now for HR and TRC, you will see, some pre-populated tables, pre-populated information, and this information is aligned with what we required a detailed budget template, you can say. The way it's structured, you can see all those detailed in instruction document, how those tables can be copied and pasted if the user is required to use those tables multiple times. The important thing is we need to link or we need to align those assumption tab with detailed budget tab. If you look at the detailed budget tab, we have various dimensions starting from module intervention all the way to payment of currency. And this is the basis we design, detailed budget assumption, standardized detailed budget assumption tabs. In addition to HR and TRC, you will see some free sheet where you can provide a budget assumption using your own requirement for other cost input and cost categories. The fourth category of the tabs is summary tabs. If you look at the summary tabs, these are divided into 4 different parts. One is budget summary by module, cost grouping, and implementers. This is one tab where you will see all those details. And when you look at this tab, there will be a drop down, like, do you want to see budget summary a total, or only for HP tab, or only for non-HP tab? And you will see all those details. The second tab is summary by intervention. Again, you will be seeing all those information based on those drop down at intervention level. And the third one is summary by cost input, and you will be seeing all those information only for HP tab, only for non-HP tab, and for total budget. And the last one is budget summary by source of funds. You will see, as I mentioned earlier, we removed, other sources of fund tabs. Now there is only one source of fund, so budget summary by source of fund, and you will have a drop down. You can select all those details. In addition to this one, you will see some other functionalities in terms of translation. You can select and you can translate all those summaries tab, because previously there was summary tab in English and summary tab is other language selected. But now we don't have separate tab. It's only one tab where you can, if you want to see in any other language, like the templates is filled in English. If you want to see in French, then you need to go and you need to select from the drop down. The fifth categorization of this tab is ICR investment landscape. This is where the user, they are not required to provide any input. Even in the summary tab, they are not required to provide any input. These are the data which is driven by other tabs, mainly detailed budget tabs and setup tabs. ICR investment landscape, these are the two tabs which are mainly used by the Global Fund for analysis purposes. Like the user, they will provide ICR detail, and then we will be looking at all those details, whether they are aligned, they are in line with the rate provided and the type of implementing entity and all those sorts of things. There are no major changes in these two tabs. These are what we used to have, and these are more for the Global Fund use purposes. That's it on the detailed budget tab. As I mentioned, we have published a detailed instruction on this one. You will see all those details. If you need any other clarification or you have any question, you can reach out to your respective finance specialist in the country team. They will provide all those details. Over.
Thank you, Satar. We have a few questions coming into the chat. So if we can go to the next slide, please. The first one, I believe, is with grant making, and I'll hand that over to Colin.
Thank you, Nicole. I will attempt to read in French. Pouvez-vous revenir sur le remplissage en ligne et l'importation de fichiers? Which I understand.
Can you please go back to the online?
The form will be completed online and imported. So during the funding request stage, the forms will be shared by the country team with the applicants, generally the CCMs, who will then complete the funding request and share it back with the country team via email. So there's no change from the last cycle in how these documents will be completed and shared with the Global Fund at the funding request stage. When we move to grant making, the PRs, the principal recipients, will be going into the Global Fund's partner portal, where they will be able to access the grant making versions of the files, complete them offline, and the final versions will be shared through that Global Fund partner portal. We will be hosting another information session estimated to be in the middle of March on grant making. So stay tuned for that invitation where we'll go into that process in much more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. So for question 13, we have finance will check in with this person to see how to respond to the error they're receiving on their budget template offline. So as this is an individual problem, we'll go to the next question, which is regarding projecting the template, if I have translated that correctly. Could I have Satar respond to this question?
Nico, sorry, can you please repeat this question? Sorry, it's a language limitation.
Yes, I believe this person is asking to see if you can project the template during the call.
Oh, right now, I think the idea was just introduction. As I mentioned earlier, we haven't made major changes in the structure and content of the template. That's why the idea was only to discuss this one. Unfortunately, I don't have the template right now. But if you have any question, you can just raise with your respective country team and finance specialist. They will, come back to you and explain all those things. Over.
Thank you. And the next question we have from Cecile on 15. Can you confirm when the revised budgeting guidelines will be available on the website?
Thank you so much. Budgeting guidelines, these are all already at the final stage, and hopefully these will be published very soon, maybe by end of next week. We are trying our level best to publish as soon as possible, but rest assured these are final, and it's only a matter of just publishing on the website.
Thank you. The next question we have is coming in from the chat. I'm going to roughly translate it, which is about the exchange rate used. What is applied in the template? Could you speak more to this, Sattar, please?
Thank you so much on this exchange rate. I think if you look at the instruction document, you will see whole detail on this one. Previously, I think when you were receiving a detailed budget template, the exchange rate was pre-populated, you can say. This time, you will see this as a blank, and you will see the instruction like you can get latest exchange rate from your respective country team, finance specialist. They will provide, the required information on the exchange rate, and then you can use those exchange rate. Normally, it's recommended like to use the 200 EMA provided by the Global Fund country team, finance specialist, for the budgeting purposes. But if you if you need to use any other rate, which you understand is more relevant or more appropriate to your context and situation, you can discuss with the finance specialist, and they will provide you further guidance on the possibility of using any other exchange rate. And these all things are clarified in the budgeting guidelines, which will be published very soon, and you will see related information in the instruction documents.
Thank you. And this next question, again, regarding the budget. Can the Excel budget file be obtained? To my understanding, but please confirm access to funding or finance colleagues that the budget is going to be sent by the country team to the applicants, usually CCMs, to fill out and submit during funding request submission.
Exactly. This is, as David mentioned earlier, this is something specific to the country, specific to the disease component, specific to the country and disease component, you can say. That's why, it's provided by country team, shared by the country team, generated for a specific disease component country. Over.
Thank you. So we're up to date with all the questions in the chat. Perhaps we can wait for a few more minutes if there are any remaining questions, but I'll take this time to share again that the slides from this session in French, Spanish, and in English will be available on iLearn within the next few days, along with the recordings in the 3 languages again. So all of this will be available to you with the links embedded in here and all the animations via iLearn. And we've shared the link in the chat a few times, but we can send that again for any who have joined the call a bit later. So we have one new question in the chat. Is it possible to submit separate budgets from different PRs? Sattar, if you're still with us?
Colin, can you please answer this question? I don't think so, because at funding request, although you can budget in a separate file, but you need to provide a consolidated budget. Yeah,
that's correct, Sattar. The reason for that is that the technical review panel, when reviewing a funding request for one or more disease components, would like to see a single summary budget for that funding request. Therefore, the entire funding request budget should be included in a single budget file. However, it's possible to add more than one implementer into a budget file. So we recommend, as part of advanced grant making, wherever possible, to budget by PR in the budget file. Later, during grant making, this file can be taken forward by the respective PRs and cleaned up to be specific to that PR. So using one file is what is required, but that should not limit applicants wherever possible from budgeting by PR to the extent that they're able at the funding request stage. Thanks.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you, Sattar. We have a question on the link to find the names of CCM members by country. I can send that in the chat shortly. One moment. See, David has beat me to it, so thank you, David. With that, I think all of the questions in the chat have been answered. So again, you will find these resources on iLearn, and you'll see more there regarding this information session. So thank you very much, and I wish you all a good day or evening ahead. Thank you.